From the moment our son was born, I felt a shift in how my in-laws treated me. What used to be the occasional overstepping suggestion turned into a steady flow of criticism. It started as little things here and there, helpful tips on how to soothe a crying baby or what to feed him, but it soon became apparent that they simply didn't respect my parenting style. I tried to take it all in stride. After all, I knew my in-laws loved their grandson. But with each advice session, I felt myself getting more and more frustrated. Whenever we visited them, they would make comments like, "You're way too strict." In our day, babies were just fine with a little sugar, or "Why don't you let him stay up a little longer? You're overthinking it." My husband, Dan, would try to back me up, but he was often caught between trying to support me and not wanting to upset his parents. I could see he was struggling, but the stress was wearing me down. Then came the final straw, a family gathering that set off a chain of events I could never have predicted. We were at Dan's parents' house for his mother's birthday. Our son, Luke, was shy around big groups, especially when the attention was on him, and he clung to me the whole time. At one point, Dan's mom, Sue, reached out to pull him away from me, saying, "Come on, he needs to be with his grandma." Luke whimpered and clung tighter. Sue gave me a look, all pity and judgment. "You know," she said, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "if you'd let him spend more time with us, he wouldn't be so attached to you. He needs to learn independence." I felt my face go hot. I wanted to keep the peace, but I was done. "Sue," I said as calmly as I could, "Luke is fine. He's shy around new people, and it's normal for his age. Please respect his boundaries." She rolled her eyes and whispered to my father-in-law, "Well, I guess we know who's in control of this family." It wasn't even subtle. I didn't even know how to respond, but I knew I couldn't do this anymore. After that day, I told Dan we needed a serious talk with his parents. He agreed, even though I could tell he was nervous. The next weekend, we invited his parents over, hoping we could set some boundaries and get them to understand where we were coming from. When they arrived, they seemed defensive, like they already knew what was coming. "We feel like you don't respect our parenting choices," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We love that you want to be involved, but we need you to trust that we know what's best for Luke." Sue crossed her arms, her face tight. "What are you talking about? We've raised children ourselves. I think we know what we're doing." Dan stepped in, his voice firmer than I'd ever heard it with them. "Mom, we're not saying you don't know how to parent, but this is about respecting our choices. We want to raise Luke our way." "Oh, so we're not allowed to have any say in our grandson's life?" she snapped. "We're just supposed to sit on the sidelines and watch you two ruin him?" My father-in-law, John, added, "He's going to grow up coddled, Molly. Kids need discipline, and they need exposure to family. You're being too protective." It felt like talking to a wall. We tried everything to make them understand, but they dismissed every word. After nearly an hour of arguing, I said, "If you can't respect our boundaries, we'll have to take a step back. We're not keeping him from you. We're just asking for respect." Sue scoffed. "Fine if that's what you want. But don't be surprised if he grows up resenting you for keeping him away from his family." And with that, they left, slamming the door behind them. Dan and I spent the rest of the day processing what had happened. We were both hurt, but we knew we'd made the right choice. For a while, things were quiet. They didn't reach out, and we didn't either, hoping they'd come around eventually. But the silence didn't last. A few weeks later, Sue found another way to test our boundaries. I discovered that she had been stopping by Luke's daycare to drop off little gifts and talk to the staff, trying to get updates on him. One day, I found out she'd even tried to pick him up early by pretending that I had given her permission. The daycare, thankfully, called me to confirm before handing him over. That night, I called Sue. "Sue, I don't appreciate you going behind my back at the daycare. You're putting them in an uncomfortable position, and it's crossing a line." She didn't apologize. She didn't even sound sorry. "If you just let me see my grandson, I wouldn't have to do that. I've got a right to him, Molly. All right?" I repeated, stunned. "Sue, he's not a possession. He's our child, and it's our decision who gets to be around him and when. You don't have the right to ignore our rules." "Well," she snapped, "if you're going to make it impossible, maybe we'll take other steps." She hung up, leaving me wondering what she meant by other steps. Not long after that, we found out exactly what she meant. Dan and I received a letter from a lawyer. representing his parents in an attempt to pursue grandparents' rights. They were taking legal action to force their way into our lives, as if they were owed time with Luke. When Dan read the letter, he looked devastated. "I can't believe they do this," he said, shaking his head. "It's like they're just steamrolling over everything we've asked." "I can believe it," I replied. "They haven't respected us once. Why start now?" That night, we sat down and researched grandparents' rights and what it would mean if they pursued this further. Our lawyer assured us that, given our strong relationship with Luke and lack of any issues in our home, they didn't have much of a case. But that didn't stop them from escalating. In the weeks that followed, my in-laws spread rumors about us to anyone who would listen. Friends and family began calling, asking if it was true that we'd cut them out or if we were keeping their grandson away. Some even started taking their side, subtly hinting that maybe we were being too controlling. Sue took it a step further by showing up at our house unannounced. When I wouldn't let her in, she raised her voice, saying, "If you don't open this door, I'm going to call CPS. You're isolating that boy and filling his head with nonsense." I opened the door just a crack and said, "Sue, if you don't leave, I'll call the police. And after this, I'm filing a no-contact order. I've had enough." She looked furious, but she turned and left, muttering under her breath about how ungrateful I was. The next morning, Dan and I took legal action, officially filing for a no-contact order. It was an extreme step, but I couldn't allow them to manipulate and control us any longer. Our peace, our family's stability, depended on it. During the following court process, Sue and John tried everything to paint us as unreasonable, selfish parents. They claimed that we were robbing Luke of a loving family. I kept my composure, even though the betrayal stung. We didn't back down. We laid out every act of entitlement, every manipulation, every boundary they'd crossed. The judge took note of the daycare incident and their threats with CPS and ultimately dismissed the case, citing their lack of respect for our authority as parents. Leaving the courthouse, Dan and I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, but also a sadness that things had gone this far. "I don't understand why they couldn't just respect us," he said quietly. "They couldn't let go of the idea that they were in control," I replied. "But Luke doesn't need people who think they own him. He needs people who love him and respect the people raising him." In the months that followed, the harassment faded, though the damage was permanent. We lost relationships with some family members who believed Sue's side of things, but we held on to the peace we'd fought for. Dan and I built a support network with friends and family who respected us and loved Luke for who he was, not as someone's possession. For now, we're at peace. I don't know if we'll ever reconcile with my in-laws, but I know that as long as I'm his mother, I'll do whatever it takes to protect Luke from anyone who tries to claim rights over him without respecting his parents or his needs. We've closed the door, and it will stay closed until they're willing to come back with respect. And if that day never comes, then so be it.